Hello, welcome back to I Say Our Wrong Reads, and today I will be describing every book in my TBR in one sentence. So, like most people on BookTube, I have an obsession with buying books, and I buy books at a higher rate than I actually manage to read them. And because of that, I have decided that it's time to stop. It is time to start making more sense of what I'm buying and making sure I keep up with the reading. And because of that, I've decided to keep a running total of the amount of books I've got on my shelf and keep that going down the way instead of going up the way. It's basically a way of keeping me more in step with what I'm wanting to be. You might also notice that I've managed to get myself a new microphone, so hopefully this somewhat improves my audio quality going forward. Right, let's just jump into it then, shall we? Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. This is a Victorian murder mystery, and that was recommended to me by a friend. The Time Traveller's Guide to Elizabethan England by Ian Mortimer. This is a non-fiction about Elizabethan England as if you were transported back in time and had to find yourself surviving in that era. Threads of Life by Claire Hunter. This is also a non-fiction, which is about the history of textiles and threads and the interest of fabric and clothing making, which I am quite interested in. As some of you may know, I sometimes make my own clothes. Doctor Who collection of short stories called Tales of Terror. Basically scary stories that involve the Doctor and the Doctor Who universe in some way. Pretty self-explanatory for this one. I'm counting these together, because the author wanted it to be one big book, and that is the Lord of the Rings Part 2 and Part 3, which are The Return of the King and the Two Towers. Now, I am currently halfway through reading the first one, which, yay. Also, my description is Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, come on. The Lighthouse Stephenson by Bella Bathurst. Now, this is a non-fiction about the Stephenson lighthouse builders. So, Robert Louis Stevenson's whole family were lighthouse builders, and this is their story rather than his. The Secret Barrister by Unknown, which is a non-fiction about the law system in England and Wales, and how it's not actually that fair for people that are going through the process, and the kind of terror tales that come from it. The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. This is about witches in the past, I think, but I'm not actually sure. Witches past, I'm going to love it. The Lost Ones by Anita Frank. Also past, set in Victorian England, Edwardian England, and this is a gothic horror-y book about an isolated person in a house. Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, which is a retelling of the Ariadne myth, myth of the spider, which I am looking forward to because I do love a good Greek myth retelling. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osmond, a murder mystery which is solved by a bunch of old pensioners. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which is, I'm not sure what this is actually about. It's got what looks like Pan on the cover, but I loved Susanna Clarke's last book, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, so decided to pick up her second one to see how it would fare. Doctor Who, the Target Collection, or the Target Storybook, which is another set of short stories collection written about the Doctor Who universe in general. The Mercies by Kieran Melgood Hargrave. Now, this is about an island where the men have all died in an accident, and so it's being run by women. And then, because it's all a women-dominated society, there's must be something wrong there, and a man and his wife are sent to investigate the witches, and it kind of turns into kind of this brutal witch hunt. The Children of Jocasta by Natalie Haynes. Now, this is a retelling of the myth of Jocasta from Greek mythology, similar to Ariadne, but this is the second book by Natalie Haynes that I've got. I've got 1,000 Ships, and I absolutely adored that one, so I've got high hopes for this. Another Natalie Haynes with Pandora's Jar, Women in Greek Myths. Now, this is a non-fiction about the role of women in Greek mythology and basically how that affects our output, which is quite on brand for her because she does tell quite a lot of feminist retellings of myths. I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle Mcmana. Now, this is a true crime description of how this woman, Michelle Mcmana, decided to try and find the Golden State Killer. Unfortunately, she died before the Golden State Killer was finally caught, but this is basically her hunt for him. The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, which is about witches in England 1643. I've got quite a lot of old-fashioned witches in my pile this time. I think maybe I'm trying to say something. Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which is a sci-fi about a crew of ragtag crew of wayfarers of a spaceship, and apparently it's quite good, so I'm looking forward to it. And then I've got Dark Matter by Michelle Paver, which is a kind of gothic horror about getting stuck in the Arctic Circle on the Franklin expedition, and it's kind of a ghost story, and it's kind of a horror, and it's that kind of spookiness. A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee, which is about a young lady, two young ladies at a boarding school, which seems to something afoot is happening. There might be witches involved, there might not be. I'm not entirely sure because I didn't actually read this too much when I picked it up. The Haunting of Las Lagrimas, I think so, by W.M. Cleese, which is about a isolated person in a house, gothic mystery. I have a favourite genre, and this is it. The Stranger Times by The Stranger Times by C.K. McDonnell. This is about a group of newspaper reporters who work for a newspaper that decides to publish the strange and unusual. This is something that I want to read quite quickly because it looks brilliant and I haven't seen it kind of pop up anywhere yet. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Larks by Rebecca Skloot, and this is about the invention of the crick, the DNA thingamabob, and how Henrietta Lacks, the person behind it, actually was exploited and that sort of thing. So it's a non-fiction, and it's about the kind of invention of the discovering of the DNA and that sort of thing. Now, I've got some weird books up next. Like a couple of months ago, I got properly invested in Murdoch Mystery Season 1, and then I finished Season 1 and then promptly didn't watch a single bit more. But while I was watching Season 1, I picked up 2 of the books. I've absolutely no idea what these are about other than them being Murdoch Mystery books. I've got Night's Child and Under the Dragon's Tail, both by Maureen Jennings. So someday I'll read them, but I've absolutely no idea what they're about, and I don't know. Then I've got Skullduggery Present by Derek Landy. I really liked a couple of his later books, but I never actually read it from the beginning. I read it from like halfway to the end. So I decided that similar to last year when I kind of went back through like the Alex Rider series and stuff like that, I wanted to go and have a look at them more. I have The Heroes of Olympus by Rick Warden, which was the second in the Heroes of Olympus series. This is Son of Neptune, which is a continuation of the kind of Percy Jackson-esque world, but this time following a guy that is Roman, I think. I did enjoy the first one, but it was so long ago already I can't actually remember much that happened in it. Then we have a nice non-fiction, which is Conan Doyle for the Defence by Margaret Fox. And this is basically about the true story of when a woman, a spinster, was bludgeoned to death in Glasgow. Basically, there was lots of speculation and who was the real killer, and it's basically what Conan Doyle did, how he got involved in the case, and he kind of tried to argue for the person that everybody thought killed her because he didn't think he did it, and that kind of non-fiction take on this true event that happened. Sticking with Scottish crime, we have then The Art of Dying by Ambrose Parry. Now, this is a sequel to The Way of All Flesh, which is essentially about a murder mystery series-ish set in Edinburgh in the 1840s and 50s. The main characters are midwives, or not midwives, they're basically early surgeons for pregnant women, and it's also involved around like the invention of the medical scene in Scotland, which was quite large at the time, especially with the started use of chloroform and pain relief for women giving birth. Then we have Neil Stephenson's Seven Eves. Now, this was supposed to be a book club book that we were going to read, and I haven't managed to pick it up yet, but I will, and I'll do it soon. I'm sorry, Izzy. I will promise I will read it, and I will enjoy it. I promise. So then we've got some weird ones, like The Wolf Den by Ellery Harper, and I don't actually know what this is about. This is about... it's set in Greece, I think. I don't know. I think I picked it up because it was pretty, which is also bad. Don't do that, because that's how you waste your money. Then we have Witchlight by Susan Fletcher. Now, this was recommended to me in what I would consider my local bookstore in Fort William. The Fort William bookstore. That's what it's called, a bookshop or something. And this is essentially about, set in 1692 in Glencoe in Scotland. And basically this woman, this girl, turns up and she's absolutely traumatised, and she might have witnessed the massacre of Glencoe, and so they're like, oh, thank goodness, a survivor, we can tell her what's happened, and it's that sort of thing, but she's strange. But it's a local book from where I bought it, and I'm looking forward to reading this. Kat Jennings' The River Kings, which is basically the story of the trade routes from the Vikings to the Silk Road, and basically how early trade links kind of started up, and it was all following through the origins of fruit through the Viking Empire, which I'm looking forward to, because I think it will kind of shed a new light on how extensive actually the Vikings travelled and how extensive they traded with other countries. Then I've got Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, which is about, also set in Victorian London. I'm not entirely sure what it's about, but it's, the main reason I picked it up is because I've heard it's a romance between two women, and I want to read more of those kind of books because I tend to really enjoy them, and it's a classic in that kind of genre, so I've decided to pick it up and see how it is. That's pretty much all I know going into it, but I want to read this one as blind as possible, I think. And then we have People of Abandoned Character by Claire Whitfield. Now, this is also set in Victorian London, this time in 1888, and this is a kind of murder mystery thriller gothic horror thing, and it's basically this woman is all alone in this house, but she thinks her husband might be Jack the Ripper. And she basically, that's what the plot is from what I could gather from the back. So then we have The Axeman's Jazz by Ray Celestin, and this is set in New Orleans in 1919, and it's kind of like a fictional description of the Axeman murders in that time. If you have watched my previous wrap-ups, you'll notice that earlier this year I read The Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz, and I now have the sequel to that, The Moonflower Murders by Anthony Horowitz. So it's basically a sequel to that. The main character in that has finally moved to where she had moved to. I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't read it, because it's a brilliant book. I would highly recommend it. And this is the second one in that series. The Betrayals by Bridget Collins, which is the second book. She wrote The Binding, which I really, really enjoyed. And just because I really enjoyed it, I picked up this one without knowing much about what it's about. The back says, winning was everything until it destroyed them. So, yeah, that's what that's about. And then I went on an adventure. I decided that I was going to try and read as much classic vampire, kind of recent classic vampire literature as possible. And that's when it brought me onto this. So first off, let's look at the first two Stephen King books I've got. I've never read Stephen King in my life, but I've got two of his books. I've got Salem's Lot, which obviously is such a famous book in terms of vampire horror and fiction and that sort of thing. But I'm really looking forward to reading this, and I've no idea what it's about, and I can't wait to get absolutely scared senseless. Then I noticed that he had done a short story called, oh, I forgot even what it's called, let me see. It was called The Night Flyer, which is also a vampire short story. So I bought this entire short story thing for this one story. I don't know anything else that's in this, but that was the main reason I bought this one. This was Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And then we have Let the Right One In by John Avanti Linderhurst. And this was basically about a young girl and a young boy, her neighbours, and the girl's a vampire. And it's scary, apparently. It's quite disturbing as well, so I'm looking forward to this one. And then last but not least, finally, we have Anno Dracula by Mr. Kim Newman. Now, I have swayed whether or not to buy this book for almost 6 years now. Every time I pick it up and I'm like, maybe I should watch it. And I keep putting it down. I'm like, I don't think this is for me. So I finally picked it up, and I guess we'll see whether or not I end up reading it. Who knows? I don't. Well, as you can see, my final total for how many books I got to left read is, which is considerably higher than I want it to be, which is why I've kind of done this as a kind of incentive to get me to push down those numbers without building my books back up. So next week will hopefully be my March wrap up, which I only read 6 books this month. I've really not had time to read at all. But after that, I'm hoping to have season 3 of Doctor Who out, and then hopefully a Peter Cushing video after that. But that's all to do with time, and if I can manage to get things edited well, I have to work full time with my university degree. So thank you for bearing with me through all these books, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!